Well, howdy, everybody. My name is Jason. Welcome to Redfish Bluefish on another, what is turning out to be quite nice, sunny Saturday morning. Thank you so much for coming by, guys. I say it every time. This is the channel where we examine art, nature, and science through the lens of the aquarist. So let me switch over to chat before we get started with the show. I want to ask, how are my audio levels right now, guys? We've been struggling with some audio problems. I think it may be a little bit better this time. So I'm just going to hold here just for a second until you guys let me know how is the audio. And then we're going to get started with an awesome show that I'm really happy to be bringing to you this time because it's a viewer's choice show. I went to YouTube and I did a little community post where I had a little poll. I asked you guys, I think there were 3 or perhaps 4 subjects up there that you could choose from, and I asked you guys, hey, which one of these subjects would you be most interested in seeing in a live stream setting? These science-based subjects, and you guys spoke loud and clear. I see from the Chubby Guppies saying overdriving slightly. Okay, let me see if I can fix that a little bit. Bump that down a little bit here. Hopefully this is a bit better. I just backed it off a bit. Okay, a little scratchy sounding, not too bad. It's okay. So we're gonna make do with what we've got to work with right now. So guys, like I say, this is very much a kind of a viewer's choice live stream here. You guys spoke. You spoke loud and clear, and you said that you wanted to know more about the science behind TDS, pH, GH, and one that really throws everybody, it seems, KH. So I'm going to do my best job of simplifying it for you, and my goal is to make sure that nobody leaves this live stream kind of not knowing how these 4 things are all tied together and why some are pretty important, why some aren't really that important at all. So before we get started, let me get my show notes ready. As you guys know, it's a tradition here. I sign on at 8 a.m. Pacific to the live streams chat, which is 2 hours early. And I'm making a note, you know, making a list, checking it twice, making notes, and I've got my notes here. This time, we're in our top 10 early bird special. First place goes to Natural Aquariums. Natural Aquariums, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you showing up so early and for your support. Second place goes to Mr. Jeffrey Watts. Jeffrey Watts is on the board every week. Thank you so much, man. Third place goes to Fish Ion Tactics. Man, that is awesome. Fish Ion, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, buddy. And from there, in 4th place, we have Color Guppies. 5th place, Leah Jet. 6th place, EJ Fishes 76. 7th place, Mr. Paul Soltero. 8th place, we got Griffin Fish Room. What's up, Griff? 9th place, a neighbor across the water from Icarmo's Creations. And in 10th place, last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Kevin Leong. Guys, if you didn't make the top 10 early bird list, well, not to fret. Next Saturday, just show up at 8 a.m. and drop some comments in the chat. Let me know that you're there, and I'll be chit-chatting back and forth with you. Let me refresh a window here real quick. See if I can fix something. All right, that's better. Looks like right now we have 22 viewing and 15 likes. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Now, this episode, like I say, is very much a viewer's kind of choice episode. You guys spoke loud and clear that you wanted to know more about the science behind TDS, behind pH, behind GH, what really is it? KH, what is it really? We're going to get into that. I've been thinking about this solidly for about the last 4 or 5 days, trying to come up with a way to get into the science and to shine a light on what's really going on in these subjects, and but to do so in a way that's not going to cloud the issue, because like with GH and KH, that's very cloudy for people, and there's a good reason for that. That's basically the industry doing that, making GH and KH seem like this kind of mysterious science that you have to rely on them, right, for. No, we're gonna show you that that's definitely not the case. So without any further delay, as I say it every week, that's kind of my catchphrase, without any further delay, let's get started. We're going to get into TDS. That's where we're going to start. By far the easiest of the 4 micro subjects, I guess you could call. By far the easiest of the 4 to explain. And it really is as simple as what TDS stands for. TDS simply stands for total dissolved solids. That's it. So a solid, we all learned that in school. Under normal circumstances, unless it's thrown into some kind of solvent, right, we have a substance. If under normal circumstances it is a solid and not a liquid or a gas, right, it's a solid, and you throw it in water and it dissolves, the TDS meter is going to pick it up, right? If you dissolve sodium chloride, which is table salt, in water, TDS meter will pick it up. If you dissolve magnesium sulfate in water, TDS meter will pick it up. Excessive copper ions, TDS meter will pick it up. All of these things are normally solids in the real world, right? Unless we throw them in some kind of a solvent like acid or water. Water's a solvent, right, for some things. If the thing is water soluble, then water is a solvent. So under normal circumstances, a TDS meter, okay, is useless to you, except for when it's not. Okay, let me get into that a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on TDS. Frankly, TDS is boring to me. All it is a mundane reading of total dissolved solids in water that you put the measuring device into. That's it. It doesn't tell you what the dissolved solids are at all. At all. It just says, hey, there are dissolved solids in here. Well, that's not helpful at all. And let me stop you before, in your mind, you're probably saying, well, he's wrong, because that's going to tell me, is the water hard or is it soft? And I would point back at you and say, no, you're wrong, man, because, hear me out. Let's say you have pure water. Right? Pure water, TDS meter is 0, maybe 1, right? It's really, really good RO water. You put a TDS meter in it and it comes back 0 or 1. Okay, fine. You take a little capful of sodium chlorite, not sodium chloride, not with a D, but with a T, sodium chlorite. It's a very commonly used medication. It's a true antifungal medication. It comes in liquid form. Usually when you treat an aquarium, you add like a capful. That's it. So you add just a few drops to this little water sample with a TDS of 0 or 1. You put your TDS meter back into it. Boom, it's reading 400, 500, 600, just from adding a little tiny bit of sodium chlorite to the water. The TDS meter is indicating that it's detecting dissolved solids in the water. That's it. It's not telling you that the water's hard, because I promise you that if you add a tiny touch of sodium chlorite to pure water, you have not made that water hard at all. So TDS is very, very misleading. Unless you are doing one thing, unless you are using it as a general guide to you remineralizing RO water. That really is the only use that it has. So let's say you're like me, I have an RO unit over there, okay? I can do 1,600 gallons a day on that thing. It's a huge unit. It's a massive piece of machinery. So what I do is I fill up that container I have over there. If I fill it like to the rim, it's 300 gallons, okay? When I remineralize my water, I use a liquid mineralizer and a liquid carbonate booster, and I add 200 milliliters of remineralizer to that, and then I add 35 milliliters of carbonate booster to that, okay? And then I mix it up. I put the TDS meter in there. It's reading 100 on the money. Okay, that really is the only use of a TDS meter. It really is, just to double check. Hey, did I remineralize that? Well, I know that if I have 300 gallons of pure water over there, and I add 200 mils of general hardness to it, and 35 mils of carbonate hardness to it, right? Carbonate hardness. We'll get into that later. The TDS meter tells me 100 every time, so it's a good bet that by sticking the TDS meter in there, I can check, oh yeah, I remineralized it, or it's spot on, I'm not off, because I know that whenever I mix it correctly, that TDS meter tells me 100 every time. That's really the only use for it. I mean, if you're getting into it, because if you're running it through tap water, you're running it through something, of course, if you're, in California, it's going to come back. TDS is going to be 600, 700, 800 in a lot of parts of California, right? So that's a major, that's really the only legitimate use for a TDS meter. And that's not to say TDS meters are useless, they're not. But they're, in most fish rooms, they're gonna be useless unless you are running RO and you're remineralizing your water. So let me take a look in chat really quick before I get into the next subject, where we start getting kind of gnarly. Kevin Leon with a comment here. Would also appreciate soft versus hard water just later when you're done with everything else. Yep, we're gonna get into that very soon. Okay, I don't think I have any specific comments just yet. It's still really early in the show. Wow, we've already been going almost 15 minutes. That's nuts. Okay, we need to move on. Okay, next, we talked about TDS. All it tells you is, are there or are there not dissolved solids in the water? It just doesn't tell you what they are, right? So use them if you have an RO unit and you are, practicing becoming a water wizard, because you are going to be learning a lot about water if you are remineralizing it. You will notice that water does some very strange things. We're going to get into that next. We're going to move on to pH. This is where it gets a little, Okay, now, pH. pH stands for the potential of hydrogen, okay? Now, all of you guys, all of you watching this have run a pH test, whether it are their pH test strips or the little API pH test kit that's liquid. You add drops to it, and there's a reagent. You got to wait a few, blah, 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 5 minutes. All of you guys have run a pH test kit, and you know that pH is a scale that measures the acidity or the alkalinity of something, okay? The pH scale goes from 0, which is to say absolute acidity, up to 7, which is neutral, which is to say neither acid nor basic, all the way up to 14, which is total basicity, or if you prefer, total alkalinity, okay? That's on the face of it. We all know that. pH is just a measure of, is it acidic, is it alkaline, or how much, right? Now, before we get into the science of pH, which stands for the potential of hydrogen, we need to talk about water a little bit. Water is very strange. It has some very weird properties that really nothing else does. A lot of you guys are aware that water is pretty much the only thing that when you freeze it, it expands, it gets bigger. All you guys have, left a beer or a soda or something in the freezer for too long, boof, it ruptures, right? Well, that's because water expands at 33 degrees, and then at 32, even more so. So, water has some really weird properties. Another property of it, water is a very weak electrolyte, okay? A lot of people don't realize this, but pure water is very, very, very slightly acidic, because of the position of the proton, of the H2O molecule. Now, with that said, because water is an electrolyte, it's mildly positively charged in its pure form, which never occurs, by the way. You never have pure water. Something's always going to adulterate it. CO2, oxygen, something. Through a process known as self-ionization, okay? Self-ionization. Water, pure water, if kept in a magical vacuumed container with no air, no contaminants whatsoever. Pure water in this container and nothing else, okay? Water in its natural state at standard air temperature and pressure, SATP, okay, SATP, pure water in a vacuum, right? Even in a vacuum, will very slowly go through a process called self-deionization. What that means is you have H2O, okay? You have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. What self-deionization means is that at a very slow rate, this will basically break. One hydrogen will go pop and it will break off, leaving a negatively charged ion of OH and a positively charged hydrogen. And what happens immediately is that hydrogen attaches to another water molecule that's right next to it. We all know that water's H2O, right? So imagine with me, we have H2O, and then one of the H's breaks off and jumps over and attaches to another H2O molecule next to it. Well, that's weird. What happens is that the OH that's left behind from that break, it's sitting there, it's all lonely, right? It's broken. And then that positively charged hydrogen ion, which attached to a neighboring water molecule, is now H3O. So now you have OH, which is hydroxide, that's negatively charged. And you have hydronium, H3O, which is positively charged. This is called self-deionization, and water, pure water, will do it naturally at a very, very slow rate, okay? Now, like I said, water has some really, really strange properties. It will do that by itself, okay? You will end up with hydroxide, right? And hydronium among all the regular water, right? So every time it happens, you get one hydroxide, one hydronium, one hydroxide, one hydronium. So let's say in our theoretical, water that's in a vacuum, we let this go on for 10 years, right? Well, the hydronium, right, is positively charged and the hydroxide is negatively charged. What's the pH of the water? It's neutral. It's still neutral. It's balanced, right? So now you're starting to see what I'm talking about when I said pH stands for the potential of hydrogen. You see what's going on? Hydrogen is breaking off of H2O, attaching to another H2O molecule, making it H3O, leaving behind an OH. Hydroxide versus hydronium. This is very important. Listen to me here. pH is nothing but measuring the ratio of hydronium, positively charged, to hydroxide, negatively charged. That's all it is. Full stop. Now, let me go through something. Let me think, how can I say this? I need to wait to go into that a little bit. So measuring the ratio of hydronium, which is positively charged, to hydroxide, negatively charged, is pH. So if we have exactly the same number of hydroniums as we have hydroxide in a solution of water, our pH is 7, right? Now, what we can do is we can mess with that equilibrium by adding substances to the solution that either lend protons or stand by ready to absorb protons. That is how we start messing with pH, okay? Let's think about this. You have water, okay? It's freshly made magical water in a vacuum. There's no contaminants at all, okay? It's 7, pH 7.0. Now, we start adding nitric acid to that water. Well, that nitric acid is lending protons to that solution, positively charged protons, right? Well, what do you think those positively charged protons are doing to water? It's making hydronium. It's swinging the solution way in the balance of positivity, right? Positivity is acid, negativity is base, right? So let's look at the pH scale. The pH scale, 7 is neutral, 14 is high in alkalinity, and 0 is very acidic. It is an inverse logarithmic scale. It's inversely logarithmic. What I mean by that is at 7, we have a perfect balance of hydronium and hydroxide, okay? At 6, which is 1 point down, we don't have double the amount of acidity, we have 10 times the amount of acidity. It's a negatively It's a negative logarithmic scale, base 10. So that is to say that water at pH of 7.0, when we compare it to water at pH of 6.0, that water at 6.0 is 10 times more acidic, which is to say has 10 times more, sorry about that, hydronium in it. Now we go down from 6.0 to 5.0, that's 10 times more. Every time it's 10 times more. So when you go from 7.0 down to a pH of 4.0, wow, that's a huge difference. Alternately, you go from 7.0 up to like 11.0, huge, huge jumps. So let me see if I have confused you guys enough. Now, another part of pH is understanding the other half of what I said. When we change, we can play with the equilibrium between hydronium and hydroxide by adding things that lend protons or adding things that will absorb protons, right? We can move on from there, I think. I think we can move on from there. Once I make an example, adding acid to water, that's going to add positively charged protons all over the place. You're going to be forming hydronium, pH goes down. Similarly, you add something very alkaline, something very, very basic to the water. The opposite's going to happen, right? You're going to be adding the capacity to absorb hydrogen ions, therefore preventing any kind of acidity from forming. It's the addition of positively charged hydrogen or the addition of the capacity to absorb it. That really is the measure of pH. So hopefully that did not confuse you guys too much. pH is a weird one to talk about. Now GH, you're looking at, well, I'll let you guys guess what you're looking at. You see the picture behind me? What do you think that is? I'll jump over to chat. What do you guys think that picture of the background is? It's a great representation of general hardness, GH. And I know, especially Miss Pamelina, and certainly a lot of other people up in the north have seen this substance and used it many, many times every winter. What do you think the picture of the little white things behind me is? I'll wait a few more seconds and I'll just give you the answer if no one says it in chat. Okay, well that is a close-up photograph of general hardness in the form of ice melter, or if you prefer, de-icer. You see it for sale at the hardware store, right? De-icer, so on and so forth. That is de-icer. Now, this is a great representation of what actually general hardness really is. General hardness in aquaria is nothing but calcium and magnesium. The end. The end. That is it. This product that you're looking at here is actually calcium magnesium acetate. It's an acetate of calcium and magnesium. Should not be added to aquariums, but this is what you're looking at. And this is truly what general hardness is in aquaria. And it really is amazing that so many people are confused about the general hardness part, because it really is just that, calcium and magnesium. That's it. That's all there is to it. Now, a lot of people ask, does general hardness raise pH? Well, the answer to that very much depends on the product you're using. Okay, I assume every time someone asks me, does general hardness, does it raise pH in my aquarium? Well, it depends very much on the product. There are some very poor GH boosters out there. GH boosters that contain certainly more than just calcium and magnesium. I'm not sure what they are, what they contain, what they're putting in it, but I can tell you the two most likely sources in a quality, in a decent, really good, quality general hardness booster is going to be calcium chloride and magnesium chloride. Now the answer to the pH question, no. Pure general hardness, Dan Slee just said it right there, pure GH does not raise pH, it does not. Now, here's where it gets a little sticky. Calcium and magnesium do not raise pH. However, we're not adding just calcium and just magnesium when we're using these general hardness boosters. Generally speaking, what we're adding is calcium chloride and magnesium chloride. Now, chloride will slightly raise the pH. Slightly. Not much, but it will. Okay, so it's kind of a trick question. Will it or will it not actually raise, the pH of my aquarium? Well, it depends on what kind of product you're using. There are a lot of general hardness boosters that absolutely will take water from 7.0 up to 8.0 like that with a very, very light dose, in fact. And those are very terrible products. If you come across a general hardness booster that significantly raises your pH, we're talking if it takes it from 7.0 to anything more than like 7.1, more than that, it's a bad product. Don't use it. There's something in it that is moving the pH of water, and we don't want that. Okay. Now, general hardness is really easy to explain. That's all there is to it. That really is all there is to it. Now, when we move on to carbonate hardness, oh boy, it gets really sticky. Now I'm going to move on to carbonate, and then we'll loop back around. I'm skipping over some content because I'm not feeling very well just at the moment. I'm going to jump over, and let's get stuck into carbonate hardness. Okay, now what we're going to do for the rest of this discussion, as much as I can, instead of saying carbonate hardness, I'm going to try to refer to it in more helpful term, okay? And the helpful term that I'm going to use is acid neutralizing capacity, ANC. Okay, I'm writing it down here so I don't forget it. Acid neutralizing capacity, okay? That is honestly, from now on, how I would like you guys to start thinking of carbonate. Start thinking of carbonate as the ability to neutralize acids, okay? The capacity to neutralize acids. Now, what we need to do before we go any further, okay, we need to talk about another weird property of water, okay? Something very strange that happens with pure water. Remember we said we had our magical water in a vacuum, right? And we were letting it split. We were letting H2O, we were letting one H split off of it, right, through the process of self-ionization. That forms hydroxide and hydronium. Let's go back to that kind of magical vacuum, and now let's crack that magical vacuum open, and all of a sudden air that I'm breathing, that you're breathing, that we're all breathing, rushes in and hits the surface of that water. Okay, over the next several hours, that pure water, well, right off the bat, it's not pure anymore, all right? It's not pure anymore because oxygen, CO2 stuff is hitting the surface of the water. One of the first things that happens is that H2O combines with CO2, okay? H2O is water, CO2 carbon dioxide. When you add H2O and CO2 in very short order, you start to get carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is H2CO3, okay? H2CO3 is carbonic acid. Similarly, if you take pure water, wink wink, And in a vacuum, you somehow figure out how to inject CO2 through a diffuser, just like you would in an aquascape, into that pure water. Same thing, same thing. You're going to be forming carbonic acid, which is H2CO3. It's a very weak acid. It's not highly corrosive. But what happens is that H2CO3 has a divalent product yield. Okay, H2CO3 will yield into bicarbonate and carbonate. Yeah, it's a very weird acid. It's a dibasic acid, in fact. H2CO3, carbonic acid, yields in solution of water into 88% bicarbonate, 11% carbonate. Isn't that nuts? That's crazy that water plus CO2 gives you an acid which yields carbonate and bicarbonate in an aquatic system, in the ocean and freshwater everywhere. Now, okay, now that I've said CO2 plus H2O gives you H2CO3, carbonic acid, and that yields 88% bicarbonate and 11% carbonate in the ocean and freshwater in the natural system. What we are doing when we're adding a carbonate booster to your water is you're saying, I don't care about the H2O plus the CO2, the carbonic acid, which yields this and that. No, you're supplanting that whole process, and you're taking carbonate and or bicarbonate and you're putting it directly into the system without forcing the system to go through that equilibrium to get there. That's your buffer. It would take a huge amount of CO2 acid, right, to overdrive that buffer or acid neutralizing capacity, okay? Similarly speaking, it would take the addition of whole tons of pure alkaline agents to move the pH much, believe it or not. It works both ways. So that's why I wanted to point out that a much, much easier way of thinking about carbonate is to simply think of it as that you're increasing the acid neutralizing capacity of your water. So if you have plenty of A and C over here, you can be adding, all kinds of acidic, acid, nitric acid, whatever you want. It's going to be a while before the pH of that water starts to move, because the acids are reacting with the carbonates and bicarbonates, not with the water. Okay, it's absorbing those positively charged ions that normally would drive a solution into acidity. So with that, I am going to go back over into chat and see how thoroughly I have confused everybody. And see if anyone's asked me any specific questions. EJ Fish is 76 with a comment here. Would something like a Wonder Shell impact TDS? Yes, it will. Yeah, it's a solid, and you're going to dissolve it. Yep. Okay. Go back down and see if I have any questions. Going way up. I don't think so. This might be a very, very, very short show today if I don't have any questions, guys. Dan Slee saying buffering is an easier concept. KH, if we talk about the entire carbonate cycle, which is to say that it starts with carbon dioxide going into water. It forms carbonic acid, which will yield a bicarbonate and a carbonate. That's very confusing to draw out the formula, and it works both ways. It can go back and forth each way. Basically, what's happening as we start overdriving and making the water systems more acidic, like especially the ocean, start driving those more acidic. We're driving the equation to the right. Towards positivity, which is to say acidity, right? Remember, the pH scale is an inverse base 10 logarithmic scale. So as the positivity of a substance increases, right, it becomes more acidic, well, it drops on the pH scale, right? It drops. It's an inverse logarithmic scale. I'm going to go up and see what is going on in chat, guys. Oh, wow, we got a comment here from Karma's Creations. Karma says, I pulled eggs for the first time this morning from my blue Galeras tanks. Any tips on raising the eggs and fry? Just be patient. Just be patient. They are, they're slow. They're slow going. Yeah, there's tons of information out there on how to raise blue Galeras. Wow, man, that's great news. I can't believe that you already got some eggs. How long ago did they lay them? That is amazing results, man. Yeah, they are not the hardest fish to breed, but I'll tell you, it's a real challenge to keep them in their aquariums, that's for sure. Let's see, Dan Slee with a comment here. Buffering can be either way. Acid or KH can act as your buffer. Depends on if we're talking plus minus 7.0. Above 7, acids eat away at your KH. Below 7, KH eats away at your acids. Yep. Acid neutrifying capacity. Gnarly Fish Tanks here with a question. If one doesn't have an RO unit to make soft water, what's another good way to have soft water? Any of the substrates, that quite plainly on the bags say this buffers your water down. This decreases KH. This will make your water softer. Any of those fluval stratum will do it. Aquasolum will do it. ADA will do it. Any of those high performance aqua soils will do it. Kind of a hack to doing it is to use Safety Zorb. You can use Safety Zorb, which you can get from any real tractor supply store or kind of hardware store, and Safety Zorb will really strip carbonate out of your water column very effectively. It'll strip a lot out of your water column. It'll take, generally speaking, very hard water. It'll take it and make it very soft water pretty quick. Okay, we got a question here from Kevin Leong. Kevin asked, what exactly is the difference between soft, hard, acidic, alkaline? Okay, so soft water is the absence of calcium and magnesium. That's it. It's that simple. So if someone says, wow, we have really, really soft water here, well, what they're actually saying is there are virtually no magnesium or calcium ions dissolved in my water source. So it's really soft, quote unquote soft. Now when they say we have really, really hard water, where I live, really, really hard water, a lot of people kind of use carbonate and general hardness, interchangeably. What they're actually trying to say is that there are a lot of calcium and magnesium ions dissolved in their water. Now, let me say this. We're talking about using GH boosters and KH boosters and things like that in aquarium water. I do want to say that in nature, almost never do you come across water that's high in GH, which is to say that's high in calcium and magnesium, which also does not have a decent amount of carbonate also in the water. That basically never occurs in nature because you can't have them in nature without each other. There's always going to be a balance. So that's what they mean when they say, my water is so soft. Well, they're saying that there's virtually no calcium and magnesium in their water, like Seattle, very, very soft water. Very, very hard water would be LA, Southern Central California, Northern California for that matter. tons of calcium and magnesium dissolved in that water, but plenty of sodium as well. Sodium can be a component of general hardness. In fact, it is a component of general hardness. However, in aquaria, when we're talking about general hardness boosters and KH boosters, sodium is typically not a component, not with planted tanks. So, Kevin also asked the difference between acidic and alkaline. Well, there we go. So it's just what we already talked about. It's the pH scale. So pH, potential of hydrogen, okay? We talked about water naturally will split through self-ionization. H2O, boom, one H breaks off of it, leaving OH, negatively charged OH behind, and a single positively charged hydrogen. Very quickly, that hydrogen latches on to a neighboring H2O ion, making H3O, hydronium. The OH, negatively charged, left behind, that's hydroxide, positively charged hydronium. pH is a measure of the ratio of hydronium versus hydroxide. That's all it is. The power of hydrogen, pH. So in acidic solutions, you're going to have much more hydronium than you will have hydroxide. And in alkaline solutions, aqueous solutions, you're going to have much higher OH, hydroxide, than you will have hydronium. It's that simple. It's really that simple. Now, the logarithm behind figuring out what the pH of something is mathematical kung fu. I'm not even going to show the formula. It's the scariest thing ever. So I hope that answers your question, Kevin. Let me see if I've got any more questions. Jeffrey Watts with a question. Any update on when you'll get more apistogrammas? I'm working on it. I'm trying to get a batch, a small, very small batch in next week, this coming week. Things have been a little crazy. So I know that everybody is looking for that next batch of apistogramma, well, fish for that matter, but especially apistogrammas. I've kind of quickly become the apistogramma guy, which I'm honored to be. I am really focusing more right now on progressing the shop build than I am, importing fish just at the moment because I'm so busy and short-handed because I'm just one person. I've quickly realized that I can't, finish the build and get everything in and, get this place where it needs to be if I'm also bringing in new fish and slinging fish and new orders like I was doing before. I can't do both at the same time. So I hope that answers your question there. It's not exactly a straight question, Jeffrey, but it's as good as I can do right now. Dan's, let's see, who has, Blue Ice Aquatics, looks like you had a question. So would Caridina shrimp live in tap water without active substrate? Probably not. No. Well, tap water, it just depends. Tap water. The reason why so many people use RO units, RO units, when they're keeping Caridina shrimp is that it's anyone's guess as to what your municipal or state run or whatever, maybe even a federal source, what they're going to do to your water source. How much carbonate are they adding? How much general hardness are they adding? Are they adding anything? Does it change throughout the year? Well, if it does, then when you add water to your aquarium with these, buffering soils in them, it may be a while. In fact, it's going to be a while before those active substrates can buffer that water down. So you may inadvertently be going, you might normally put water in there that's pH 7.2, who knows? Well, you might draw water out of there one time. It might be pH 7.6, 7.8. There might be the addition of a lot of additional sodium. Maybe they put something else in your water. And when you add that to your aquarium, you're going to definitely change the water parameters quite quickly on those Caridina shrimp. And if you're using an active substrate, it's been buffering carbonate out of your water, which means your pH is going to move drastically very quickly. and those Caridina might not survive. They certainly won't be happy no matter what the outcome is. They won't be pleased. So that's why so many people are such huge advocates. If you keep Caridina shrimp, please consider getting an RO unit. Because even with, trickery using safety Zorb, these really highly active substrates that buffer water like crazy, your source is always going to change if you're going from municipal source right to your substrate. Guess I'll tell my Caridina, Marie, they should be, well, that's, not all Caridina are created equal, Dan Slee, you know that. You're very welcome, Kevin. I think, yep, Dan Slee with another comment there. Might want to touch on how important pH stability is. It is, yeah, we just touched on that. Yeah, if you are, yeah, like I said, I mean, if you're not going with RO water, I mean, how do you know what your source? I mean, your tap water might normally be 7.1 or 7.2, 7.4. Your shrimp are used to it. You add it a little bit, every week. Do a water change, and your soil buffers it down. Well, let's say they changed one of the additives, and it's not 7.4 anymore. It's 7.9 or 8.0. Like my pH out of the tap here is 8.0, 7.9 to 8.0 on the money. It's not very hard, meaning the TDS is about 140, 150. That's not very hard water at all. Very low on the, in terms of calcium and magnesium, but it's got plenty of carbonate in it, right? Well, that raises the pH up. So yeah, like I was saying, they may have changed your water, and it's maybe not your source water from your tap isn't 7.4 anymore. It's 8.0 or 7.9, and you do you add 30-40% water change to your your super sensitive animals, and all of a sudden, pow, you've got a major pH change, and depending on the animal, they might not do too well with that. So let me jump over and see if I got any questions. Yes, TDS, general hardness, KH or ANC, acid neutralizing capacity, as well as pH are all interlinked. They're all interlinked together. They are measures, they are 4 different measures of the same aqueous environment. Think of it that way. We have an environment. We can measure all kinds of parameters in it. We want to measure how much acid neutralizing capacity it has. You want to measure how much magnesium, calcium is dissolved in it. You want to see how much, what the pH is, how much H3O versus OH is in the water. That's your pH. You want to measure TDS. Well, that's not a very useful reading, but it just gives you a very general reading of how many dissolved solids are in this water. That's it. So they're just 4 ways of looking at the same aqueous environment. I hope that made sense. I hope that didn't confuse you guys even more. Let me scroll up and see if I've missed anything else. Oh, I did miss a question here from Kevin Leong. I have a bunch of shrimplets. Suggestions on how to keep them alive by chance. I know you do more fish, but well, I have many shrimplets alive right now. Tons and tons of Neocaridina Blue Dream. I'm assuming, Kevin, that you're talking about Neos. Neocaridina, they love to eat. They tend to hide like big time and live specifically on biofilm until they're about maybe 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters, maybe about 1 millimeter, 1.25 millimeters long. Usually won't see them until they get about that size, and at that point they really come out and they're looking for to eat more than just biofilm at that size. That is when it's definitely key to provide plenty of food for your shrimplets. So often when you add food, like if you feed shrimp cuisine from Hikari, or maybe you feed shrimp king or whatever it is, just make sure that you're adding plenty of food and not just in one pile. You kind of want to scatter it around away, like feed a little bit of food away from the main pile, which is where all the big shrimp and the adults are going to pile on and start pigging out. Often the little tiny baby shrimplets don't get a bite to eat because they just get muscled out of the way. So make sure that you're spreading it around. That's actually why I quite like Hikari's shrimp cuisine, because the little tiny granules are so small. So I can drop a little pile of them on the normal food tray, the food bowl in the aquarium that all the adult shrimp will pile in. It's basically a petri dish. But I can also sprinkle some of the little tiny shrimp cuisine pellets all over in the gravel, and that gives the little tiny shrimplets a chance to get a bite on their own, away from the melee of the main, the feeding frenzy. Oh, thanks, Dansley, I appreciate it. Keith Hanshaw here. What do you use to measure your KH and GH? Okay, so initially, I use just the API test kit. I have a master test kit, actually. I don't know if you guys can see behind me on which side. Got a bunch of products for sale here, or that will be for sale here. One of them behind me is the API master test kit. I have always owned an API master test kit, always, my entire life, in one capacity or another. And what I do is, I've been doing this thing for a long time. Basically, when you're mixing, okay, let me back up a little bit. Let's go into water wizard mode, and then I'm going to wrap up. When you make RO water and you're remineralizing it for use, general use in like an aquascape or a planted tank, any kind of aquarium scenario, typically speaking, okay, this is not set in stone, but typically speaking, you're going to add 6 parts of general hardness to 1 part of carbonate hardness. Generally speaking, that's not across the board, right? So what you normally do is you say, well, I want to raise my GH, and I run my GH at 3, my carbonate hardness at 2, okay? What I do is I added very, very small amounts of measured general hardness booster until I got it to 3, okay? And then I used a TDS meter and I said, okay, it's at, whatever that number was, and I wrote it down. I can't remember anymore. And then I said, okay, next I want to boost my carbonate hardness, or my ANC, my acid neutralizing or acid absorbing capacity. I want to boost that to 2. So I have a GH of 3, KH of 2, very, very soft water. It's very typical for planted tanks. It's nothing out of the ordinary there. So I added a little tiny bit of carbonate booster, mix it up, and test it with your test kit until you get it at 2. And then run your TDS meter through it again. Now, what that does is it tells you, as you're measuring as you go along, what I realize is that to fully remineralize and recarbonate, right, 300 gallons of water, I need to add 200 milliliters of my general hardness booster and 35 milliliters of my carbonate hardness. Well, if you take 200 and you divide 35 into it, send 35 into 200, close to 6, right? There we go. You get that 1 part carbonate to 6 part general hardness kind of general rule. Now, with that said, you run your TDS meter through there, and I did, and I was like, oh, wow, that's 100 on the money. It was totally accidental. So as it turns out, my general hardness booster that I love and my carbonate hardness booster that I love mixed into 300 gallons of water to give me a GH of 3 and a KH of 2 just so happens to be exactly 100 on my TDS meter. Now I know in the future I don't need to bust out my GH and KH test kit anymore and play magical water wizard. No, I just need to mix it with 200 mils of general hardness, 35 mils of carbonate hardness booster, mix it, double check with TDS meter. If it's 100 on the money, Bob's your uncle, you're done. That is really the only good use of a TDS meter. I'm sorry. I know that people are going to say, oh, that guy's an idiot. He doesn't know anything. Passionate Fruit here, mentioning something. I'm going to talk about it here in just a second. Let me get to some questions and make sure I haven't missed any. Yeah, Matin filters are definitely, Kevin, Matin filters are where your shrimplets are going to hang out. They're eating biofilm. Okay, well, let me jump down. Passionate Fruit, thank you so much for the comment. Passionate Fruit says, is your website working? Well, yes, the website's working. And then the follow-on comment, it won't let me select the payment option at checkout. I've tried on multiple devices. Yes, 4 days ago, the middleware between my website and my payment processor, actually, no. What happened is there's a major problem between my ISP provider, my e-commerce provider, and my payment gateway. They have been plugging away at it for 4 days, and they can't fix it. So I have called and been working with them, and I've tried everything, and it's basically on them at this point to get it fixed, and they can't fix it. So with that said, I kind of had to tell them bad news yesterday. Well, guys, I mean, if I can't accept payments, I'm not in business. And if I'm not in business, well, you're fired. Sorry, man, you can't provide me with the service that I paid you to provide me with. We're done. So I am working on getting another payment gateway set up. I hope to have it live today. It might be Monday. With that said, if you are trying to check out, please just shoot me a message with the contact form on our website. I will work with you. We'll do PayPal. I'll work with you in any way I can to get you taken care of, to get your order placed. And I apologize. It's actually pretty embarrassing that you have to find out about this stuff from a customer that had a problem placing an order. And I kind of put that back on my providers, and they're just like, it's no big deal. So to me, that's unacceptable. That is a terrible level of customer service. So yeah, they're gone. Let me switch over to chat and see if I missed anything. Dansley, okay, Dansley, how is that not the only use of a TDS meter? I mean, you can measure stuff and be like, hey, there's dissolved solids in that, yay! What are they? What are the dissolved solids, Dan? It doesn't tell you. So we'll hang around for a couple of minutes, and I am going to be wrapping up because I think someone else is going to be going live in 30 minutes. It looks like I just got a pop-up on my phone saying Big Tank Hank is going live in 30 minutes. That's pretty cool. Yes, Passionate Fruit. Thank you so much for that comment. Gives me a good chance, a little segue to explain what's been going on there. So after this, guys, I am going to be dragging a ton of stuff out of here. Pallets, cardboard boxes, stacks of, oh man. I've got a massive pile of hanging merchandise that I would really, really love to get hung up one of these days. Waiting for a bunch of pegboard and stuff. Okay, Dansley, scroll up. I'm not replying, but it's a measure of change, which is super useful. Well, that's what we said. That TDS meter is really only useful if you're starting with a clean slate and you know exactly what you're adding. And in the case of general hardness, which is the addition of calcium and magnesium, and then in the case of adding, a carbonate booster, you know what you're adding because you started with a clean slate. So I reiterate, unless you are starting with a clean slate and you know exactly what you have added, right? There are no variables. You know exactly what you've added. Then yes, a TDS meter is useful. But if you are starting with not a clean slate, like you are, you test your aquarium one day and it says TDS 250, and then you put your TDS meter in and it says TDS 350. Okay, something changed. What changed though? What was added to your aquarium? Was it sodium chloride? Did somebody add some antifungal medication? Did somebody add booster? What happened? Did you have a massive evaporation of water? Well, you would notice that. You would see that the level is much, much lower. Is useful for tap as well? Yeah. It's useful to tell you that something's in your tap water, Dan, and you don't need a TDS meter to tell you that. So guys, we're gonna wrap up here. I appreciate you coming by and hanging out. Wow, we actually went 3 minutes over the hour. That pretty much never happens here. I am pretty much on the money. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate you coming by and hanging out. My name is Jason. You've been watching Redfish Bluefish. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I really hope to see all you guys here next Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific. That's 1 p.m. Eastern time right here on the YouTube. And I wish you all peace, love, and really nothing but happy fish keeping. We'll see you next time, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.